I'm Vanessa Callahan, your host, and we are live on the Calm Empowered Parent on Instagram. We're about to be live on Facebook and also on YouTube. Sometimes it automatically starts some things. So anyway, if this is your first time here, especially for the Instagram folks, this is called Ask Vanessa Anything. It's an opportunity for you to raise your questions. So feel free to pop some comments in the chat. Otherwise, you can listen in on questions that other folks who have already been submitting their questions. So excited to be here with you today. Lots of interesting questions today. And yeah, let's dive in. So I have from Dai a question about needing some guidance dealing with her husband while parenting, she says. For some context, she has a 3-year-old, but I don't know a whole lot more. So without the information, I'll just, give you some tips that have come across, sort of in my work as I've worked with families for the last, 20 plus years. I've seen some things. I've also been in a relationship while raising children and for about a decade. So I know that there are some things that come up, of course, that put a strain on the relationship. And before I even get into tips, I just want to say, first of all, that there's a whole episode in season 1, episode 9, with Coach Imani H. She's a marriage coach who's also on my team, one of my teaching faculty for the the Family Foundations Immersion year-long program. So if you want to hear more of her advice, please do check out the Calm Empowered Parent, the podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out that episode with Imani, season 1, episode 9. So in the meantime, Dai, I would just say the hardest years of the marriage tend to be the first 2 years you're having children. And so the fact that you made it to 3 years old is significant. And I would say too that you might be experiencing sort of a stack of things that you didn't quite get to deal with or talk through or come to an understanding about during those first 2 to 3 years. That's really common because oftentimes we're in a bit more of that sort of basic needs meeting survival mode, or some people even call it like triage, where you're just sort of putting out the fires, trying kind of like dealing with the more immediate needs. And so a lot of times things stack up. So what I would really want you to do is get really real for yourself about like, what is it that, has been unsaid in your marriage, in your relationship, during these past 2-3 years of raising a very young child, and get a chance to like kind of have a conversation with yourself first around like, what are the things that tend to sort of trigger you and flip your lid, especially ones that where you find yourself saying always and never. Those tend to be longstanding patterns and things that you haven't really been able to work through yet and communicate well about. So, like you always forget to blank, or you never remember to blank, whatever comes up and that's really charged, I would put special attention on those. And then I want you to get down to 2 things about it. And this is also what we teach our children. What is the feeling that is at the core of that? Is there a fear or anxiety that, oh, if we never do this, like if we never teach our kid this a second language like we said we would, then they won't be able to learn a second language fluently. Maybe there's a fear that you have and you're angry at your partner because they haven't put enough effort into that yet. And I would just want to name the fear, the anger, even if there's resentment, like just get that down and like really like allow yourself to feel it and acknowledge it. And then the next thing I would do is see like, what is your first ask? And I think when I say ask, it's like, it's sort of a way to capture the idea that you have something that is an ask and not an expectation necessarily, but an ask. So sometimes the first ask is, I'd like to have a candid conversation about whether or not we're going to actually, take this more seriously around teaching our child Spanish or whatever language, for example. And the ask is not, I want you to commit to every single day spending an hour with our child speaking this language, because it's a little bit too big and it's a little bit too top down. You're not really collaborating, right? So I'm making the assumption that you would prefer a more collaborative environment in both directions here. And that would be helping both of you feel calm and empowered. part back to the mission of this podcast. And so, yeah, so you identifying the feeling you're having at the root of it, seeing what your ask is, and really ask is like seeing, can I break that down into smaller steps? Like, is there a smaller ask to start with? And then you can go into a conversation really like this is what we have our children do when they're also solving conflicts or trying to work through a problem or get a need met, is you would love, for example, your kid to say, I feel frustrated that my sister keeps getting to go first when we play games. And my ask is that we flip a coin next time so it's more fair. Gosh, wow, what's so developed, like so well put together. And like the child has really thought through what they need, and also how they feel about it. And you have the right amount of information to then support them and maybe even empathize and be open to their ask and getting curious about solving problems. Well, it works the same with adults. So if you go into a conversation with demands and expectations and not sharing what you're experiencing, it's going to shut things down. If a child were to do that, it might sound something like, you make my sister give me a turn, right? It's very different than saying, I feel frustrated when because this is happening, basically like an I message or I statement. And then here's what I think I need around it. And then you have a real place to start with your conversations with your partner around the things that haven't been going well, Dai. So especially at 3 years old, oftentimes there are things in the relationship, if the communication hasn't been flowing, the task management hasn't been flowing, there have been even some hurt or some harm done that you have to like repair from. There's usually quite a stack up, and you might be in this really tense place of resentment. So I would start inventory it, put down the feeling word, put down the ask, see if you can break that ask down into smaller parts. And that's a great place to start. And do really listen to episode 9 of the season 1 of the Calm Empowered Parent. Coach Imani has amazing ideas. That's why she's been on my coaching staff since the beginning. She gives incredible advice around communication pitfalls, communication fixes, how to set goals together as a family that are within reach, how to kind of go first in the relationship to be that model for what kind of relationship you want to build with your partner. She's incredible. So do check out that episode, Dai. Okay. So the next question we have, and I want to say hi to Scotty. Hi, Scotty. Glad you're here. Someone who's been checking out our services and hanging with myself and Coach Catherine coming up. Love that you're here, Scotty. Way to make it today. I have a question from Aleida K, who has a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old. Says, it feels like I'm constantly negotiating with our 4-year-old. How do I navigate this stage? Well, first, let's just acknowledge that negotiation is a sign of intelligence. So you have a smart one on your hands, because they are trying to understand through negotiation how things work, right? What can I get? Can I get more of it? When can I get it? Can I have it now? How much are you willing to give me? How much are you willing to, sort of pay attention to me? How much power and influence do I have? These are all very natural instincts of a 4-year-old. So just to normalize that this is their intellect coming online and getting sparkly with synapses of wonder and curiosity and what might feel like really frustrating testing behavior and demanding behavior. But it's also very natural. And it is up to us to provide the structure for them to understand within reason for their age how things work. So one thing you can do is that you can make sure that you get very clear. And so something I love doing with my clients, get really clear on like what is a choice and what is not a choice. And the more clear you are about that, the more they will relax about testing it. Because imagine if they get an answer that they do have a choice one time, but then another time they don't get a choice, and then they don't get a choice, and they don't get a choice. And they're like, hey, but what about that time 3 times ago when you gave me a choice? They're still waiting for that choice to show up again, right? Where it is actually their choice. So a couple of tips around this one. Pick the things that aggravate you the most and get really clear, like that you're constantly negotiating about, and get really clear about what part of that is within their sphere of influence and what part of that is just fixed. It's just how it works, how it is, right? So maybe in your family, like you only do desserts on the weekends, and that's just a thing you do. And so you say, oh, sweetie, let's check the calendar. Oh, it's not Saturday, it's not Friday. Maybe it's only Friday, Saturday nights. It's not Friday yet. It's only Wednesday. That means we have 2 more days until we have dessert. And it's just clarity, right? And that's that structure. And so say, yeah, so it's not an option, not a choice to have dessert tonight. And then they can have their feelings about it, but they'll see that there's some sort of rhyme or reason and there's some order to it. And eventually they'll learn the pattern. And it'll get really kind of inefficient and cross purpose for them to negotiate about dessert on weeknights. They just, school nights. They'll just like start to incorporate that into their understanding of like how things work, right? So that's something you can do is get really clear on your expectations and also communicate them very well for your child's age. Speaking of communicating things well, we were just talking about this in a client session in my year-long immersion, where we want to get as clear and concrete with our language as possible. So notice I didn't say, "Oh, you don't get desserts on school nights." I modeled walking over to the calendar, and concrete means they can see it, they can feel it. It's like a sensorial experience. You point to the calendar, like today is Wednesday. It looks like we have 2 more days until Friday night. So are we going to have dessert tonight? No. We're going to have dessert tomorrow night? No. We're going to have dessert on Friday night at the end of the school week? Yes. And you can even reinforce that's because it's a weekend night. And if we burn a lot of energy, we can sleep in a little the next day. Like if there's a reason you have, share it. Yeah. But do something concrete, be specific. I'm saying Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I'm not just saying weeknight. They don't really necessarily know what that is yet. We're helping them build their understanding of the world, and that includes introducing new vocabulary. But when you want to create limits, you want to help them through their emotions, you use language they know, and then you expand upon that, okay? Another thing you can do to avoid constantly negotiating is make a commitment that you're not going to negotiate. This is one of the hardest things to do because it requires us to not just be clever with our language and maybe be more clear, like I was suggesting, but to actually let go of your side of the negotiation. And this can be tricky because oftentimes what we'll do is we'll kind of give a lot of attention and even some power to our young ones, like our 3, 4, 5-year-olds, even 2-year-olds, by continuing in a communication pattern that's like not really getting us anywhere. And this is especially a problem if they're already upset, like if they're agitated. We use this metaphor of the brain in the palm of the hand in my program. So if their lid is half off or more, that's not a time. Scotty knows about this. He's here. That's not a time for us to try and have like lengthy conversations back and forth to help them understand why a limit exists over and over and over again. Negotiate. Okay. So you can let them know simply, and I would bring in this language. Oh, sweetie, this is not a choice. Yeah, not a choice. Yeah, this is how it is. And just like kind of like that at the end of what you say, like, yeah, yep, this is how it is. Just like this, it's raining outside. It's a fact. You're delivering a fact. And it's kind of like on the neutral but firm side. And then the other thing, last but not least, is kids do like having agency. They do like having influence. So try and find something they do have influence over, even if it's the main thing is not a choice. So it's not a choice for them to have a dessert, but it is a choice if they wanted to help us with load the dishwasher or help us rinse the dishes today. It is a choice if they want to, which book they're going to read at bedtime, or it is a choice of like what game we're going to play right after dinner. It is a choice if we're going to hop to the bathroom to brush our teeth or slither like a little snake on our bellies, right? So you can give them choices where you can happily go along with the option they pick, and there's a lot of like maybe even creative freedom where they can say, not a snake, not a bunny, I want to be a mouse, and go as quietly as I can. You're like, great. Should mommy be an elephant? Boom, 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 right? And then you're kind of moving on and redirecting to the next thing where they can kind of assert that will that they really want to like exercise. So I would say it's not about shutting down their need for power and influence. It's about redirecting it towards things that you can happily give them power and influence. Aleida, I hope that's helping you get on the right track with your 4-year-olds. Let us know if you need anything else. Okay, new question. Imani H, who has a 4-year-old, says, how do I deal with resistance to everyday routines? I'm going to put this with Heidi Gardner's, who also asked with her 13-year-old, 5-year-old, and 2-year-old, how do I respond to undesirable behaviors? Because there's a connection here. And also Heidi provided a little bit more information. So Heidi said, specific daily conflicts, including defiance, entitlement, being rough and careless, or flippant remarks, and even body language. All of them have been acknowledged and are a continuous problem. And she really wants to work on it and works best with things like acronyms and diagrams and scripts and tangible tools. So she says, thanks so much, that she's looking forward to learning more. So Heidi, hopefully you're catching this session either live or on the recording. Okay, so back to the main question. We have, again, Imani asking for, how do I deal with resistance to everyday routines? And Heidi, how do I respond to these undesirable behaviors? Okay, well, this is going to be a fun session because we have a lot of questions like this. Okay, so first thing is, when you're with your little ones, dealing with resistance to everyday routines or with undesirable behaviors, it's often because we need to make sure that we're really clear about what the routines are and the kids have had a chance to have time for training on them. And I'm borrowing from Jane Nelson's term, take time out for training. I love the positive discipline work. It's not really a plug and play, like you need experience using these tools to feel like very comfortable just pulling them out in the moment. And I love helping parents get more experience with the tools so they do get more and more versed in them. But there are a lot of great frameworks and ideas that we pull from the positive discipline world. So shout out to Jane Nelson and her team. But when we're talking about routines and undesirable behaviors, we have to think about what skills are needed and even what level of sort of self-awareness and self-management, self-direction, self-motivation are required for kids to execute the routines that we lay out for them. So when I work with clients, for example, around routines, I often ask them to get clear about like, which of these things can my child actually do independently of my help? And it doesn't mean that they're capable of putting their shirt on. It means they're capable of putting their shirt on when I'm not in the room or my back is turned and they're still waking up, right? Like all these things. So I always ask, like, what level of support is actually needed for each of the steps in the context of the routine itself. And if you can get kind of down with what level is really truly needed, it can help you also kind of like let go of an expectation that they're going to be running this routine on their own. Because a lot of us have this should around, my kid knows how to put on their clothes, they know how to brush their teeth, they know how to, like put their lunchbox by the door, but they're not doing it and they should be doing it. Well, motivation's a little trickier than that. So it turns out that, kids oftentimes need more help, not with the actual task, but with the skill of staying on task, of being focused. So when I had a classroom of 12, 24, 36, 48 kids that I was managing and, co-managing with other caregivers, a lot of times our main job was to assess like how independent can they really be with their ability to stay on task and focus. And if they're not yet independent, what level of support do they need right now? And how can I move them towards independence and better focus? And a lot of that had to do with motivation science, like how to intrinsically motivate the child to do the activity so they would stick with it. But also consideration of how distractible is a 4-year-old? Pretty distractible. So how do I create a setting where it's less distracting? Or how do I increase their focus by bringing an intrinsic motivator? So there's always this kind of like these dials you're turning in order to move a child towards meeting that expectation of independence. But first and foremost, like accepting that it's not a given, and it doesn't mean your child is disobeying you and being defiant necessarily. A lot of times they really are just like kind of rolling away from the task because of a lack of focus or low level of motivation to do the task. So let's infuse our routines with the right amount of support, the right kind of mindset about what expectations we can hold, and then some tools around focus and motivation. Okay. So one of the tools that I like to bring in for my clients is having the kids have more ownership of the routine from the beginning. So creating the routine together and doing it in an age appropriate way. So with a 4-year-old or your 3 or 2 and 5-year-old, that's going to look really different than Heidi's 13-year-old, of course. So what it might be is like you map out the steps and roll through them together as a family several times, practicing them, talking through what happens, And even asking a question like, is this where you need mommy's help, or can you do this by yourself? Just planting that idea in their head of, I can do this by myself, or I need parents' help. And that way they're even asking themselves, can I do this myself, or do I need to ask for an adult help? Well, great question that can help them tune into their level of self-management in the moment at that age. So there's ways that you can roll through it. I don't have time to go through all of the steps because that's something that we do over 2 months in my year-long program for a reason, because we do it in steps. But that's a place to start. Okay. And then more about the undesirable behaviors. So Heidi gave us some specifics. So let's roll through those. She said specific daily conflicts include defiance, entitlement, being rough and careless, flippant remarks, and body language. Okay, so let's start with I think we kind of brushed on the defiance, but let's talk about when it's clearly like I've had extreme things happen in the classroom, and also parents were like coming back, and I mean extreme, like obviously an act of defiance. Like I've had a kid pee on the rug and stare at me while they do it. I was like, okay, woo, we're bringing out the big stuff here, my friend. And that is definitely an act of defiance, because it's a clearly, they're making eye contact with me. They know what they're doing. They know they shouldn't be doing it. And they're like, kind of like, what are you going to do about it? Right. And there's that end of the spectrum all the way down to what we might perceive as defiance, but they're really just being, kids that they're not staying on task well. So let's kind of scooch up the scale of defiance. So like mid-level defiance, they know they shouldn't do it, they do it anyway, but they're kind of like looking and testing, or they're hoping you won't notice, which is different than staring at you while they do it. That's where you might want to get curious about, like, okay, what is it that is the underlying need, or underneath this, right? Is this helping them get attention? Is this helping them learn how things work? Like, what are they trying to learn from this? Is this about power? They're trying to test and see what they can get away with. That's all natural. So it is defiance. And we even have like an oppositional defiance disorder that, kids can be diagnosed with, where they're chronically defiant by default. And if that's something you're concerned about, please go talk to your child psychologist in your network, or school counselor, and just describe what's happening. You can also do that with me and my coach, Catherine, and we can, who's an occupational therapist, and we can kind of give you a sense of whether you should maybe be looking at an assessment, because it is a real thing that needs special care. But for, kind of the average, typical defiance, it's actually a healthy sign of a child having a strong spirit, and having desires, having needs, having opinions of how things should work, and really engage in trying to figure things out. So when we're moving towards those conflicts, we want to have all this in mind. And what I think that helps us do is be less triggered. It's like, okay, this is all a part of them learning and growing. Defiance comes with the package. I've got a spicy kid. I want this kid to stay spicy. I'm not trying to squash their spirit, squelch their fire and, their passion, but I also need them to understand how things work. So if you go in calmly, but also understanding that they may take it further than you will once you put your foot down. So I always say, don't actually pick a fight with a 4-year-old, because they're always willing to take it further than you will. Like, are you willing to put your face down in the dirt with snot running down your nose and scream? Like, I'm not. So, probably stay kind of, try to stay calm on your side. Don't give in to the power struggle, but yeah, let them know what their choices are and what needs to happen next. And if they're doing things like being rough and careless, there needs to be an appropriate response from the environment. And what an appropriate response from the environment might look like is saying, wow, sweetie, it looks like you can't really be in this room with your siblings while your body is being unsafe. You have your rough body. We need you to find your calm body again if you want to be in the same room as your siblings. Or if you want mommy to sit next to you, you want daddy to play this game with you, right? And you can even ask and say, is everybody still having fun with multiples, right? And it's like, and then raise your hand if you're not sure if you're safe right now. And like, it's a good check-in with everybody that you can build in for your sibs. And also, like, the game can end, and that can be the consequence, but you could give them an option. Say, oof, this looks like it's getting a little too rough. I've said this 1,000 times plus. This looks like it's getting too rough. Are we going to be able to continue this game in a safer way, or do we need to choose a different game? Yeah, like rewind and play that over several times for yourself if you like, because if you're listening to the recording, because this is something that, like, if you have that locked and loaded in the moment, it really does help. So Heidi was asking for scripts, so there's a script. Another thing is to deal with the flippant remarks. You can ask questions like you can have a little reasonable response like oof, right? Like oof, that sounded like a hurtful thing, right? So you say oof, were those words hurtful or helpful or neither, right? And you can move to family values. In our family, we choose the kindest words possible and we treat each other with respect. And then don't try to nice it away, though. Be careful, because asking your kid, like I had this client, for example, who used to say, be nice to your sister when they were like throttling each other. And it's like, well, it's kind of a big leap from down here where I want to choke my sister to be nice, right? So we did this thing called scaffolding, which I love helping my clients figure out. Like, what would the next step be away from trying to strangle each other? It might be like stomping away, right? So they're not ready to be nice, perhaps. And you can still reinforce, if you can't be kind, you need to stomp away, right? You need to take yourself to the next room, or we're going to need to choose another game, like I mentioned. But what is the next step up the scaffold? It might not be. And then eventually it's like, take a few deep breaths in the space and see if you can calm yourself and try again. The next might be like, is there another way you can say that you think your sister, or are there words you could use to help your sister understand what you need right now, right? And then maybe it's like, use your words, use your kind words, and they have a sense of what might be needed. I need to stomp away first. I need to take a few deep breaths first. I need help finding the words first, right? Or I need to think about my words and then say them. Like, all those steps you've built in become their little formula for like how to walk themselves through a conflict. Okay. So we are coaching them with this step by step. Flippant remarks, body language. I mean, it's very similar to the rough and careless. You get involved and you ask a question and see if they're able to try again, if they're able to, say it another way. Or you can even ask, do you need to walk away until you're ready to use your kind words? Do you need to take a few deep breaths before you're ready? And try those out to see which ones land well with each of your kids, is what I would say for Heidi, and for anyone out there with your different sibs, because what works for one family member may not work for another. I've definitely had kids who cannot stand breathing, and I've had other kids who, like, that's their lifeline. That's how the only way they can put their lid back on. And I love to package in a bonus course with my clients around 6 calm down effective tools, effective, quick, and easy calm down tools. But I also offer the free guide on my website. So if you want to go and check that out, you can go to thecalmempoweredparent.com, and it should be right at the top where you can get your free PDF of my 6 favorite calm down strategies. And sometimes with siblings in particular, my last hot tip is that you can give them some kind of, or like, moments that means like we need a family reset. Just in case that didn't stream because there was a little blip in the internet. So what you can do with sibs as a family is you can come up with a code word that means like we're going to take and even a gesture, like we're going to take a break. And maybe there's even something right before that. So one that has worked very effectively in several families with siblings is everybody having fun? And if all participants cannot joyfully agree, then you could say, looks like you need a break, right? And then the third thing you might say is, what do you need to do this to keep going then if they protest, right? Or let's go ahead and take a break, right? If you just need to insist on that. And I like this gesture. This worked a lot in the classroom. I'd say, hey, Brian and Alex. And they'd be like, okay. And they would kind of go do their own things. And then I would check in with each of them individually and see about bringing them back together to solve the conflict. All right, so I think, that's what we can cover in this Ask Vanessa Anything segment, but I wanted you to have several ideas to play with. In terms of diagrams and scripts, I'm all about it. My whole library is full of it in my course. So that's part of what I think works best for families. We can all read a book, we can all listen to ideas, but what are the tangible things we can do and say that are actually memorable? I had some folks on a discovery call with me. It's called a parent strategy session in my world. and they said, I really liked your workshop because you gave us like these acronyms we could remember in the moment, and that's so helpful. And it's right, because otherwise in the moment you're like, I should do something, but what is it? But if you have something you can pull from, a model that has something memorable about it, even just a key question like, are we still having fun, that I just gave you, that can be really helpful. So thanks for naming that, Heidi. It's a benefit for all that you kind of put that forward in your question. Okay, next question. Oh, sorry, here we go. Let me try again. Next question is from, oh, done. Sorry, I have the wrong date on here. Okay, let me try again. Next question comes from, no? Okay, one more time. Next question comes from Deanna Van Eggeren. And she asks for her 12 and 7-year-old, they are in like a totally different world with technology. So how can I communicate effectively with them? So Deanna, with your 12 and 7-year-old, you're asking, they're in a different world with technology, and how can I communicate effectively with them? And you also have a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. Okay. Yes. First of all, let me just acknowledge what's happening with your pack of kids. Kids change a lot in the 6 to 9-year-old time. It's a really exciting time, and that's why I often encourage people to get some mentorship before they turn 6, if possible. And if not, like, let's make sure you really understand the 6 to 9-year-old time, because they're shifting dramatically from this sort of sensorial based, concrete, everything needs to be very physical, to a more complex, abstract space. And so they're going to want to do things like construct their society, their little societies of the household, and have a voice in family meetings, and they're going to be wanting to see their ideas take shape and have influence. So once they hit 7, if you haven't given that to them and had a collaborative atmosphere for how we communicate, how we relate to each other, how we take care of the environment, how we deal with conflict, they're going to start bringing in their own ideas about that, or they might even have a habit of ignoring you entirely because you haven't been a source of that yet in a way that's reliable, consistent, and that they connect with. And so I'm describing this, Deanna, because maybe there's something there that could be a little gap you could kind of close and fill that might help you have an in with your 7 and 12-year-old. But universally, what I would say, if you want to get better communication flowing, is that you've got to consider the 4 steps of winning cooperation. And I know several of you have heard this from me before, if you're a listener of the podcast and or have attended my school workshops on motivation or a client, but it never gets old. It's something that, because of the rush of daily life, we're trying to get tasks done, we're trying to move things forward, we're trying to get out the door. We often get out of this mode of actually attuning to our kids, and even just 30 seconds of attunement can improve the entire morning. So when you have a chance to connect with them first before correcting, directing, instructing, making a request, making a demand, do it. Okay. Even if it's just for 30 seconds. So Deanna, where you can start with your 7 and 12-year-old with the technology is to get into their world of technology. Even if it's unfamiliar, even if it makes you uncomfortable, especially if it makes you uncomfortable, because they probably sense that and then don't want to share very much. Like if you say things like, I can't relate to that, I didn't have that as a kid, over and over again, they're going to go, she can't relate to it, I'm not going to communicate with her about it anymore. So do the brave thing and kind of get hip a bit, get more hip to what is current and what your kids are particularly interested in. And that might mean sitting down next to them for 30 whole minutes, sometimes watching people play video games while they comment in a high-pitched voice, and you're going to want to lose your mind. But instead, just try and see if you can find 1, 2, or 3 good things about it that make sense while your child enjoys it, and name those things out loud and ask questions instead of just coming in kind of judgmentally, which I've done, guilty, saying things like, why do you like this? I don't get it. I never wanted to do this when I was a kid. Oof, not a great opener, right? Instead saying, oh, like truly, what is it about this particular, commenter or this particular game that you like? And let them open up that world to you. And then you can even say, can you show me your favorite part? Is a great one, right? are like, what is it about this level that's easy? What is it about this level that's challenging? Um, have you earned, and like if you're not a video gamer, have you earned anything cool lately in the game? Because there's usually things they can earn. Or do you pass any interesting levels or solve any interesting puzzles or complete any interesting quests? Like start to get their vernacular, their language, right? Now, if it's social media, you can say, are there any accounts you've been following lately that you've really enjoyed? And I've been thinking about this too for even folks who have those adolescents in general. Um, like they're looking outside of their family for influence. Like that's a very natural transition of an adolescent, 12 to 15. They're actually looking for more like sources. And that's why they turn to their friends so much, but also now they have this whole world of people publishing content to turn to also. And show real interest, start an account yourself, start following some of the people they follow, just so that you can be in touch with what their influences are. Think of it as like driving on a field trip when they were younger and their friends are chatting in the back and you get to kind of listen in. That's what gets to happen on social media now, to some extent, right? Also in real life, post their friends and allow for screen time and see how they connect with each other when they're in the same room and also connecting with technology. It's all going to give you more insight and make you a more trustworthy person to open up to. All right, I have another question from Scotty, who's here live. Scotty asks, what is a good way to approach hitting, spitting, and scratching, etc.? When he is really upset with me, there seems to be no way of talking with him when he's offline. Yeah, like his lid is flipped. And he resorts to those things to express his anger with me. Gotcha. Okay. So I'm so glad you've identified that it's anger. That's really important. And you can very briefly mention that you see that he's angry. And I'm going to walk you through the steps of emotion coaching, Scotty, which we're going to practice a lot in the program. But since he's a client, you'll get more information on this. But I want to walk you through an example of emotion coaching a kid while you're reinforcing the limit at the same time. It's a very difficult thing to do, but once you get this down, you'll feel very equipped to handle these moments. So what it could sound like is this: "Ooh, buddy, yeah, we don't hit because that can hurt bodies." There's your structure, your demand, right? Your firmness. And the kindness is, "You must be really angry to be wanting to hit daddy." There's the support and the kindness, right? But daddy's going to need to hold your hands if you keep hitting, right? Or go into the other room and close the door, right? So that's that clear structure. Like it's not okay to continue doing this. Is there something must have really made you mad, and I wonder if I can help you with that, right? And because sometimes what they want to do is they want to express their anger, but they can't find the words. So you're just like providing some words that they can go, right? Or something like that. Or like, right? And they keep doing it. And then, sometimes some sympathetic structure, which is like, I wish I could give you the thing, but I can't. So it could be like, I wish we could spend more time at the park right now, but it is time to leave. Shoot, I really wish I could. Here we go. We got to head to the car. Are you done hitting me? Can we do it with peaceful bodies? Right? Okay, do you want a hug? Like you can start adding in some emotional support. Do you want a hug, honey? Is that what you need? A hug? Okay. Oh, looks like I need to give you some space. Is that what you need, honey? Some space. Okay. So there's like ways that you can like either offer that there's another way we can be in the same space, or like a hug would be appropriate, right? Or you can hold their hands and try and see if you can get them to calm down. But if there's like multiple things, like they hit you twice, 3 times, they start spitting out when you're holding their hands, they start trying to get you with their feet or some other object, then that's when you just say, looks like you're not ready. And you kind of carry through the limit with something that looks like a consequence, but is really just the result of the situation. Like it's not reasonable to let him continue hitting you or spitting you or scratching you. So a reasonable response for you is like, "Ooh, I really don't like that, and we're going to make this stop somehow." So that's where the holding his hands, asking if he can put his hands in his pockets, asking if he can walk away. You walk away. You put him in a bear hug hold sometimes is necessary if you're in a situation where there is no option to walk away. I've even, had time out, like time away from the scene in a car, bring the kid to the car, close the car, stand outside. done that. Like, and I'll say through the window, are you done? You know, I'll crack the window. Are you all done? You ready yet? Oh, you're not ready yet. Okay. Well, daddy's gonna wait. It's okay. You know, and you just make it kind of boring. And he's like, ah, thrashing and stuff. And you're like, oh, sweetie, when you're ready, you can come out. Are you ready? I've done that before. I've had to, right? Because there wasn't another option. Maybe that's the only, you're not in a structure. You're just out in the world and you only have a car, right? So there's ways that you can just make sure that he knows you mean business, and you make sure that he can't continue to harm your body, while staying calm, while always giving him the option to show you that he's ready. Always, like, not like punishing him afterward for flipping his lid. Just letting him know that you saw how hard that was for him. And and then eventually, when the lid's all the way on, you've moved into a space of like, he's not offline anymore, he's online. You can then go over the limit, why it exists, help him understand his other options, have him practice those options, etc. And that's sort of the outside of the upset moments. Okay, great. So Scotty says, thank you. This is really helpful. So happy to support you today and into the future as your coach. Great. All right. So next question I have is to Patty Kelly. Yes. Okay. So Patty says, with her 13-year-old, 7-year-old, and 4-year-old, that her biggest struggles are sassy backtalk, eye rolling, and disrespectful arguments, raised voices, and even hitting the younger kids, as well as self-centeredness from her team. Also, her 7-year-old doesn't listen or follow instructions, is argumentative, and has angry outbursts, while her 4-year-old whines and has emotional outbursts. Understandably, Patty ended her question with the word help with an exclamation point. So Patty, this is for you and anyone listening who can relate to how things can go at these different ages. Let's start with your little one. So 4-year-old whining, you can do a thing where you can definitely ask them to try again in their regular voice or their big kid voice, depending on whether that's a trigger or not. Sometimes kids like it, sometimes they don't. So you can try that one on, the big kid idea. And then don't respond to their whining messages. And it's going to take some discipline at first, but I've helped kids stop whining in like 3 to 4 weeks, definitely by 2 to 3 months, where they whine like a tenth of the time, 10% as much as they had before. And it's because if the whining doesn't work as a mode of communication, like it doesn't make the thing happen, then we are all efficient in the end of the day, we get rid of strategies that don't work. So one of the things you can do is just make sure that you're not taking the bait, you're not responding to the whining. And you can acknowledge that they're whining. It's not stonewalling them. It's just saying, oh, yeah, I can't really listen when you use that voice. Remember, hun? Can you find your regular voice? And then the other side of it, though, is if they're not able to find their regular voice, then you have a clue of how dysregulated they are, and that they might actually need something different than what they're asking for. Like they're not actually asking for what the words are that are coming out. What they might actually be saying is, I'm hungry, I'm lonely, I'm tired, I'm already really frustrated and angry about what just happened with my friend or whatever it might be, right? So listen for it as a clue. If it doesn't go away, they're not able to find their regular voice, right? And still give them some support and some help there, but don't give into the demand they're making with the whine. Okay, it's really important, and that can be something you can shift pretty quickly. So there's some hope, some immediate hope there, Patty. And if you don't have luck with it, it's a complex. Maybe consider hopping on my website, going to the parent section, and seeing what's available for support, whether it's my quiz or a free parent strategy session. Because I open up my calendar at certain times of the year for folks who I haven't met with before for a complimentary session. So see if we can help you more with the whining there. Let's keep going. So emotional outbursts, again, you're also looking for how far is their quote unquote lid off, like how, from a scale of 1 to 10, how dysregulated are they? If they're 5 or higher, which is probably what you're talking about with an outburst, do everything you can to empathize and soothe and keep safe, and get that lid back on down to like a 5 or less, 4 or less. That way you have a reasonable brain to even talk through whatever's going on with. Some ways that you can do that, you can distract them, you can use some positive talk, you can have them take breaths, you can move them away from the trigger, you can do a lot of things. So I do have a free guide on my website if you haven't gotten one yet. go ahead and pop in your name and email, and we'll send it to you. You can go to thecalmempoweredparent.com, and it should be right at the top. It has 6 strategies to help kids through their emotional outbursts. In my world, we spend 3 days on this in a virtual bonus retreat for my clients. We also spend 2 months talking about how to become a great emotion coach and work through outbursts with kids. But that's the guide is a place to start. And the tip that I just gave about making sure you become what I like to call a really good lid detector. Like, how far is their lid off? Yeah. Okay. All right. Next part of Patty's question. So again, Patty was asking, my biggest struggles are sassy backtalk, eye rolling, disrespectful arguments, even raised voices and hitting the younger kids, and self-centeredness with her teen. And then with her 7-year-old, doesn't listen or follow instructions and is argumentative and has angry outbursts. Let's talk about your 7-year-old next. So your 7-year-old doesn't listen or follow instructions. So I always ask, like, where is the motivation breaking down? Do they have enough power? Are they seeking attention, trying to get attention in these ways? Is your child maybe having like a very strong opinions, but doesn't feel like they have enough influence? Where can we get this child kind of bought into the request we're making? And so that's part of why I always emphasize with 7-year-olds, 6-year-olds and older, they need to have a voice, and their opinion needs to have weight. And it doesn't mean that they get to decide, but you need to actually kind of drop on their level and consider where they're coming from and why they're asking for what they're asking for, why they're doing the opposite of what we're asking for, all those things. So getting curious, getting on their level, really connecting with them, seeing what is on their mind and what might be kind of behind their lack of listening to your instructions and their arguments. I've even had a client, and something you might try if it's since you say they don't listen and is angry about it as well, there might be some stacked sort of charge around your dynamic. And so one thing my client did that seemed to really diffuse things for even several days or weeks was that she said, this is a complaint session. All I'm going to do is listen and ask for more information. So there's no defending, there's no arguing from your end. And you like set a 10-minute timer and you say, what's wrong with this, right? And especially as they're getting angry, not if they're out of control angry, but if they're just like, they're starting to get frustrated and you start to see their tells, like hot cheeks, tense body, maybe racy kind of demanding thoughts. You're saying, argumentative, so maybe starting to get argumentative. I say, okay, I'm going to hear you all the way out. And then I want to hear any complaints you have. Also, middle children have complaints. They're often sort of the one that doesn't quite get what they need in the moment. They have to sort of go with what the little one needs, or the older one gets to decide more than they do. So giving middle children more attention when they're in these modes and kind of in this pattern can be really helpful in this particular way. So see if they can do a good like complaint kind of venting session with them and see if that can kind of empty it all out. And what you might also get out of that is learning more about like what's going on underneath it all. I've had parents do this with their angry kids and the kid ends up crying because underneath it is some hurt, is some sadness, is some hopelessness around bettering their situation with their sibling or with their friend or with their daily, whatever it is that's stressing them out. So this can also be a really cathartic experience and give you more information about what's really going on, so you can maybe not engage in the power struggle and maybe like meet that underlying need that they just aren't able to articulate in the moment. Like I've had kids express fears to me. I'm really scared that when my friend moves away, I won't have any friends. And that's why they were being so mean to their friend that was leaving, because they were mad at them for making them feel scared. Think of how deep that is, like getting to that depth with your, that was at that time just turned 8-year-old, can really also build a lot of trust in the relationship and gives you two a little bit of a shorthand. It's like, is that like when your friend was leaving? Is something coming up like that? And they can be like, no, it's different. And they can tell you what it is, or they can say, yeah, I think that's happening again. And now you have this better rapport with your kid. Yeah. Because anger wants to be seen, felt, and heard. It has a message. So let's let that message have its time in the sun in a way that isn't going to be damaging to objects and people or, the people in the environment around them. So that's something I would encourage you to do. Also, if they're really that unmanageable and you really need some support, find support. And it can be with someone like me or someone that's in your community. But just know, like, walking through what these episodes look like and getting some eyes on them can be very, very helpful. So you can get maybe some of that insight of even where to guess, like where the underlying sort of fear or anxiety or sadness might be behind the hurt that might be behind the anger. Right. And now when we talk about your sassy, back-talking, eye-rolling, disrespectful, even physical, self-centered teen, gosh, I think there's a lot to maybe unravel there. So similar to your 7-year-old, I would have a listening session or 2 or 3 or 10 and have that kind of be your default for a while, is that you listen more than you speak with your teen. And, as long as they're being like, they're not being, unsafe to their siblings at the time, like you set aside the time, you go somewhere where it's going to be okay. They're going to have some privacy and you really let them offload and like, okay, what else you got for me? And then, you'll have a lot more reference points to get into the world later. And then I want you to do something, which is ask for their permission to talk about what you would like to see change for both of you, right? Would it be okay if we had an open conversation about what needs to change to improve things for both of us? Clearly, you're not happy. All this stuff is coming from this place of hurt or anger or, resentment, whatever. Clearly, I'm not happy to be receiving all these things like, eye rolling and things like that. Doesn't feel good either. And you can do this with an older, like a teen, just kind of get real with them. Like, that's not the kind of relationship I want to have. Is it the kind of relationship you want to have? Like, are you enjoying this enjoying the way we communicate? Are you getting what you need from me? Like, am I getting what I need from you? Like, I don't think so. So like, what can we have an open conversation about this and get their permission? And if they say no, you can say, well, it's not so much whether or not we're having it. It's like we need to have this conversation, but when we have it and where we have it within like the next week can be up to you. So why don't you give that some thought? You don't have to tell me right now, and you can like leave right after you say this. Don't have to tell me right now, but when you're ready, I'll be checking in with you in the next day or two about when and where we can have that conversation. And maybe even like what we're doing, like maybe we need to go for a walk or get some ice cream and do something we enjoy, and then come back together and see how that feels to just have an open conversation with this intention. Teens respond to being talked to more maturely, even if they're being immature. It's pretty profound. So think of them as a viable thought partner who could work this out with you. Like, really have that faith in them, that you believe that you can get through to them and they can get through to you and you can reconnect. Okay. It's really important, Patty. And thank you for raising this question. It's a really valuable one. I have a comment from Scotty, who's here live. He says, something I discovered the other day was getting down to his level and asking, what was the problem, or what is the problem? How does it make you feel, and what can be done to help fix it? Great. A lot of what we've been sort of outlining. He says that being patient was really difficult as part of him wanted to defend the situation, but being patient and listening yielded good results for us both. We all just want to be heard, big or small. Snaps up, Scotty. I'm snapping my fingers here. Really good insight. So true. Yes. And kind of right in line with what we've been talking about. So well done. And seeing the priority, right? The priority is not for you to win the argument or for him to understand on the spot and defend things, right? It's more about how the rapport you have and the kind of communication you get to enjoy as a family, especially when you're disagreeing. Yeah. Good. So that brings us to our last question from Nicole. Nicole has a 17 and 3-year-old. She says she'd like better communication and dealing with big feelings and misbehaviors, what she struggles with most as a mom. Can you offer any wisdom in these areas? Nicole, when you're wanting to establish better communication, let's borrow from something that my client Scotty has shared in this session. He said that something he discovered was getting down to their level and asking what the problem was and how it made them feel, and also what can be done to help fix it made such a difference. It's kind of under the umbrella of connecting before correcting, or the 4 steps of winning cooperation, where you get into their world first and show some understanding before you try to share your feelings or fix the problem. And actually, well, a lot of parents will skip all the steps and go straight to fixing the problem and even frame it as a demand. Well, if you would just blank, then you could have blank, right? or, you should blank, or come do this instead, right? Like it's just like make it happen and not really involving the child or the teen. So I think especially with your 13-year-old, you can't get away with just telling them what to do. Like they have to be a part of it. You can tell them what your expectations are and you can have them figure out how they're going to meet them. But you really can't be like telling them step by step how they should do it unless they're in that mood with you. Like they're like, can you show me how, mom? Which is like music to my ears from an adolescent. It's so rare. But come back to, yes, the connection first. So one thing I had a client do that might be useful for you as a mom, Nicole, is that you could take a hiatus from giving advice for a full 2 weeks. It's so hard. It's going to be a struggle, but I'm telling you that that struggle will be worth it. So just say we're like to yourself, I'm on an advice break. I don't give advice. I only ask questions and listen. I don't make suggestions. I don't fix their problems. The only time you do is if they make a direct request for it. Give you a little space for your 13-year-old to just show, or sorry, your 17-year-old to show up as they are, and maybe having their own ideas. And the second thing I want you to do, besides taking a hiatus from giving advice to your 17-year-old, is ask them what they've tried already. Oh, what have you tried? And just see what they share with you. Because a lot of times one of the worst assumptions we make of all children, but especially teens and adolescents, is that they haven't already thought about this, they haven't already tried several things, and that they're complaining before they've even processed the information. As a matter of fact, I think that we constantly underestimate how much kids have already put into fixing something, solving something, addressing an issue before they bring it to our attention. I would actually ask everybody to make the assumption with your adolescents that they've already tried something or several things before they've voiced their concern. Okay. So not advice, just asking for more info. Oh, tell me more about that. And like, oh, what have you already tried? And see if you can just stop there and see where that brings you with your 17-year-old. I just think there's this way that we can sort of turn our teens and our adolescents away from us when we jump to conclusions, make assumptions, and or give unsolicited advice. Because one thing that they are like allergic to, they will cringe, they will even tell their friends how bad you are at communicating with them or how annoying you are, is if they get the sense that you don't get it and you're still giving them advice. Think of back to a time that you were in that position where you know your friends or your work situation, and immediately, as soon as you share that you have a problem, someone jumps in and goes, oh, you know what you should do? You should just do this. Especially if the word just is in there. Oh, even I get triggered by that. Cannot tell you the number of times I've been told to just go write a book or something. Like I was just like, what are you doing right now? Want to ask me what I've already tried, Anyway, so I want to leave you with this thought, everybody, and particularly on Nicole's question. When it comes to wisdom, I really do think that one of the key elements is empathizing with your child's position. The fact that they have limited life experience, the fact that they're learning and growing, the fact that it's their developmental work to be doing things like differentiating from their parents and finding their own individual identity. It's called individuation. Or it is their work to be testing limits and understanding how power and attention works. Or it is their developmental work to put everything in their mouth and squeeze everything and try to break it to see how the physical properties of matter operate in the world. It is their work to sneak around and see what they can get away with, right? In adolescence, especially. It is their work to try out different identities, and that can be music, clothing, makeup, all kinds of things in order to find their way to their authentic expression of themselves, whether that be something like musical taste, all the way to gender and sexuality, all the way to how they speak. Like I've had kids try on accents, and it's part of their work of growing up. And it's also very hard in small moments to permanently traumatize your children. So please don't be a scared parent to try new things. Do though pay attention if you have a chronic problem that is stacking up to what we would call big T trauma, where they don't think they have a secure connection with their children and they don't have a trusted adult to bring their problems to. Because the most resilient young adults have one trusted adult that they can bring their problems to, that they believe in them. So be that adult as many times as you can, and you'll be on the right track. Thank you, everybody, for today's session. So good to connect with each and every one of you. Bye for now. And lots of love to you. You got this, and we're doing this together. We're not alone. And a special thanks to Scotty for being here live. It's always great to have someone live on Zoom, and anybody who is tuning into the live streams. You can catch me most fourth Mondays of the month for a live Ask Vanessa Anything. And then we take the best of these and put them together to become a podcast episode. So please go check out. There is an episode right now in season 1, and there'll be more in the future that take some of the best of these questions and put them together into podcast episodes. Last but not least, if you have found this valuable, please go ahead and give us some love. Either, hop on our list by getting your free guide on the website, or go ahead in whatever way, like, comment, subscribe, share with others, turn on your notifications, etc. It really does make a difference in sort of spreading the word that it is possible in this day and age in modern parenting to be a calm, empowered parent. And you don't have to, change who you are. You can still be a very authentic version of yourself, maybe even the best version of yourself that parenting affords us the opportunity to rise up to and become. Lots of love to every one of you once again. Bye for now. Thanks for tuning in.